Welcome to It Tastes Like Burning, a completely nonsensical podcast about volunteer fire departments with overrated opinions and completely unrelated facts and or opinions that probably shouldn't be followed or advised, but you're more than welcome to laugh at.
I'm Jesse,
I'm Matt.
and thanks for tuning into our podcast. We hope it's as fun for you as it is for us.
Theoretically.
We're going to go ahead and kick off the old podcast today. Tastes Like Burning. I'm Matt.
I'm Jesse.
We've got a very special guest with us today. We searched far and wide and somehow or another sent out many Craigslist looking for ads and managed to find the world's most perfect guest for today's episode. And what we're going to talk about is fire trucks in general, but particularly the process of just building a fire truck and everything that's going to go into considerations for building an apparatus. And then I'm sure at some point we'll probably segue off into looking at restorations. But primary focus at the beginning is definitely going to be building apparatus.
Because every fireman loves his fire truck without a doubt. So, this guy, we'll let him introduce himself, but this guy knows more about fire trucks than I've ever forgot or ever will know. So we'll build him up to a point where he can't stand on his own, and then we'll let him go. So without further ado, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Ross, and I've grown up around fire trucks. I guess since about 8 years old, and like everything about them, old ones, new ones, yellow ones, sometimes white ones, mostly red though.
Yeah, red's pretty.
It's pretty common, terrible color.
So since 8 years old, you must be a multi-generational fireman, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
All right.
True.
That's awesome.
I've actually owned 4 or 5 of the antique style trucks, and sometimes older is not better, but 50s were good.
Right. I've had the privilege and luxury of being able to spec and build. Let me think here real quick. We have one tower, an engine, a light and air truck, 2 brush trucks, and I think that's all. No, well, there was a heavy rescue in there also that I was kind of involved with. Don't necessarily want to go into particular manufacturers, pros and cons there, but it doesn't matter who the manufacturer is at the end of the day. Everyone's going to kind of have their very specific build when they go into what they're expecting for the apparatus. And then there's going to be the hopes and dreams part of that truck. Levitation, nuclear reactors, and turns out they're expensive add-ons. And sometimes you'd actually forget to add things like headlights.
Yeah, you might need those. But you still need that levitation feature. That's a given.
Who doesn't have that? Ross, in your experience, we'll start with just like a kind of a smaller department. In your experience, what is some mistakes that maybe you've seen in some of the smaller departments when they build a truck, and then just like a correction or a recommendation that you added into the departments to help perhaps not just modernize their apparatus, but make it where it's more applicable to their region?
I think one of the things we see a lot is they don't have a true purpose for the truck or a single purpose. They try to make a truck do too many things for their budget, for their station, for their community. And you can create a really monster if you say, okay, it's got to seat 6 and it's got to seat 8. I've got to have 2,000 gallons of water and, all these bells and whistles. And you're going, great. And you got $85,000 to spend. Man, that's going to be,
Yeah, that's
not reality.
I didn't know China was selling fire trucks to Walmart yet.
Yeah, there you go. So that's probably the one thing you see a lot of people try to start off with, especially, like you say, a small department. They may not have anybody on the department with any experience, but they read the magazines, they see the ads. He's like, I want this brand because theirs is sexy, and good luck with that.
Some of those departments may only get a truck every 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a stretch. Those guys in their career have never seen a new fire truck.
Exactly.
Yeah, with the exponential rising cost in apparatus, because right now we're trying to kind of poke out and take a look at some trucks and have things built up going into the future. But the price increases by the hour right now are staggering. Everyone is going to have to either come to a point where they're only buying, we'll just pretend, major city department where they typically buy 10 trucks a year. They may now only be buying 3 because of the cost. And their only other option is to sit there and come up with alternatives to the classic fire engines that they used to buy all the time. And we could easily segue into the classic engine versus mini pumper. And that in itself, I think, could be a full different discussion. But Ross, what do you think about the smaller departments maybe incorporating, instead of being able to buy a brand new engine that may be applicable for their district, what do you think of the application of the mini pumpers are?
Yeah, we see that a lot. And if you look over the last 30 or 40 years, a lot of it's economics. If you look in the 70s, some of the bigger departments in the New York area, they went to that concept. Or like a booster, they called them booster trucks or A-wagons. But a small truck that could, a lot of bang for your buck, and a small chassis, 2-man, initial attack, whatever you want to call it. So I think it's a trend we'll see again.
I want to jump back to the that Swiss Army knife approach that you were talking about a while ago, because I've been a big advocate for not having that Swiss Army knife. This is our engine rescue ladder / boat. It's one truck. We drive it in the water. That gets you into a world of hurt because
yeah, it's overweight. You can't conceivably find what you need because you've got so much stuff on the truck.
Yeah, and I look at it from the operational standpoint where that's your primary only thing that you take to everything. So what happens when that truck needs service or is out of service or on another call, or you're kind of toast at that point because you don't have stuff spread out in an area where you can go in a different apparatus.
Yeah, it's this is don't get me wrong, I believe in utility. Utility is awesome, but there's a reason that you actually have a tower. There is a reason that you have a rescue. There is a reason that you have a engine. There's also a reason to consider supplementing other apparatus into your fleet. If you have the luxury and privilege of having a light and air truck, it's a fantastic piece of equipment, but it is not an engine. And it doesn't matter how much extra stuff that you throw in there from a utility point of view. At the end of the day, you still need the engine. Still more than likely going to need that light and air truck. It's kind of a delicate balance. I can understand when you get to considerably larger departments where you're able to actually kind of break it down, have dedicated stations, dedicated tasks and responsibilities and dispatch priorities. But when you get to a smaller department, particularly like us, because we're where we are, that real classic rural and urban interface, it's utility can be your best friend, but it can also be a curse. Because what do you need a kitchen sink on a fire for? You got 3 of them, but why? We kind of suffer under that burden a little bit, where we have the luxury of having a community that supports us very well. Not only the citizens, but our local governments. And we have a tendency to literally load down our apparatus, kind of like they're the Israelis marching across the desert. We literally take everything on one truck, and it makes it difficult for someone trying to learn the apparatus, when there's literally, if you truly go through an absolute piece count, there's probably 1,000+ things on one truck. And it makes it very difficult for someone new to actually remember that. And then you get to deal with people's personal opinion and where things belong. And you'll have things like, particularly our traffic cones. Those stupid cones bounce between 3 compartments. And it's because you don't know who was in the truck last and where they put them. And you just get to juggle. I really do wish that we could standardize all of our equipment across the board. Sounds great, sounds easy, sounds like something should be easily implemented, but we also have different makes, models, manufacturers. Compartments aren't the same, and storage in each compartment's not the same.
Well, one of the trends we've really noticed the last couple of years in new trucks is that people want to, it's a kind of a throwback, but it's a basic pumper. It's got a 4-man cab. It may be commercial. It may be custom. And the ladders are on the side. It's pretty short. And it has one purpose in life, hose and fire. Just put the wet stuff on the red stuff and leave all that rescue stuff to a specialized vehicle or put it on a mini pumper. But we're seeing more and more. And it was regional, and now we're starting to see it all across the U.S.
Do you think that's a cost factor, though?
It's a cost benefit because now you're not spending huge sum of money on it. It's got a single purpose. It's going to fight fire. It may have a combi tool on there so it could handle an accident, but it's not overboard. It's not trying to do everything. It's not a do-all or
Yeah, that Swiss Army
a
knife.
Swiss Army knife. We're seeing that more and more. And the other benefit from it, it's a basic truck. It's simple. It's easier to maintain. It's easier for the shop. You know, back in the, I can still remember some of the different things that different manufacturers came out with, you know, put the engine in a different place and make the cab quieter and all that. Now you just created a maintenance nightmare for the Ford mechanic. He's looking at the truck going, now where did y'all put the motor? Oh, it's under the hose bed on the left side at the sideways. Oh, great, you know.
Yeah, or the pump in the back. I got the joy of running one of those for a decade or so. That's horrible.
Yeah, I know some cities that bought them, and they didn't buy 1 or 2. They bought 8 or 10, and then everybody hated them because you're like, some days you're good. You're on the curbside. You're safe. But the other days you're sticking out in the middle. And like, there you are. You know?
Yeah, and that's that old classic, you know, top mount, side mount
Oh, yeah.
discussion. You know, that's one of those things that can go anywhere.
True.
I'm a firm believer in the top mount. Love it, but
Yeah,
So the day you have to use it and climb up and down 50 times getting water, and it's like, oh, you know, now your calves are burning, and you're like,
I've preferred the top mount. It's safer. It's for traffic. Visibility's 10 times better. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of benefits to the side mount. There is. But if I had to absolutely pick every single time, I'd take a top mount truck. Does it suck when it's cold? Yeah. Does it suck when it's raining? Yeah. Does it suck when it's hot? Yeah. But you sure can see.
yeah, but it sucks when it's those things anyway, regardless.
regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, unless you're inside.
Ross, is there a particular apparatus that that you see more of a benefit to a smaller department versus a bigger department?
It depends on the current resources the department have. If they're in good shape as far as pumpers and tankers and so forth, I see more and more of a trend towards not recently, I mean in the last 15 years, I've seen departments that can benefit from the mini pumper because they have more people that can drive it. You know, the sooner you can get the first couple of guys in the truck on the way to the fire, the better. If they're sitting around waiting for a driver, you know, I've seen that I don't know how many times. You drive up to the station and there's 5 yellow helmets sitting there in the truck ready to go, and what are y'all doing? Waiting on a driver. With a mini pumper, you know, a little Ford or Chevrolet chassis, anybody, your grandmother could probably drive it. She probably did drive one. She jumps in with a crew, they hit the call, and they take care of business right away, as opposed to waiting. You know, we're going to wait 10 minutes for a driver to show up. So I've seen that time and time again. Manufacturers have built different versions of them over the years. They've incorporated more and more space in them. They're able to do more, but still they're just pretty basic.
Well, I'll just ask the silly questions about that. So how big a pump can I get on one of those?
Well, crazy enough, you can go up to 1,500 GPM on a PTO pump, and you can do pump and roll. Realistically, I don't know that you would use 1,500 GPM but it's capable of it. You're going to have a 250-gallon tank or maybe 300-gallon. You've got the hose and appliances, but realistically, you're probably going to pump. And this goes back to the 60s. Most of the mini pumpers had a 250 or 350 GPM, maybe a 500 GPM PTO pump. But realistically, with 2 hand lines, that's really what you're going to pump. So I think sometimes it's overkill to, it's got a 1,500 GPM pump, wow, and it weighs 4,000 pounds. The pumps are heavy.
Yeah.
Why would anyone put a pump that big on a pickup truck?
Because, as the manufacturers, because they can, because Watrous or Hale or whoever gives them the pump, and we can do this, and it'll hook up to that, and you can, have GPM. I guess if you were using it as a manifold to feed an aerial, I guess that's one possibility.
And that goes back to that old booster. We ran a booster where I was from, and that booster truck was initially the first arriving truck, and then it was supported by an engine, and it became the manifold. That's what it became. Yeah, it became the manifold, and the tack lines came off of it, and everything else was just, an engine that was either sitting at the hydrant or forward laid, reverse laid, whatever it did. I remember having the old, I'll drop a name, a Sims. There may be a few people that know what a Sims is, but it was set up for a reverse lay. So you dropped your gated Y and your 1.5 at the house, and then you laid a 2.5 back to the hydrant, and the truck sat at the hydrant. And that's kind of an antique, archaic way of doing things, but it still was happening. And this is in the late 90s, early 2000s.
We used to see some even larger towns, they would do that 3 or 4 times on a structure fire. If it was a commercial structure, you would see them drop it and lay out in 3, 4 different directions. But that was just the way they normally operated.
Have you seen any older technology or ideas, concepts that are starting to make a comeback into the apparatus?
Well, going back to the basic work pumper, just ladders on the side, not high sides both sides, but ladders are easy to get to. We're seeing narrower pump panels, which is good. You had there for a while where you had a 70-inch pump panel, and talk about wheelbase. Now it's hard to turn the truck, but
Yeah, it looked like pipe organs going down the road. There were so many valves on the apparatus.
Well,
it was nuts.
You needed an LDH on all 4 sides,
Right?
And 2 deck guns, and.
Oh yeah, we've seen several of that.
What about new technology coming in? Is there a particular piece of new technology that you've seen come in that maybe you at the beginning were kind of like, well, I don't know about this, but in the long run, it's like, no, that was actually all there. It was,
I think a lot of that leans towards maintenance. We're seeing the introduction of Wi-Fi into trucks, and so I can take up to 4 or 5 devices and connect to the truck, or I can Wi-Fi to the manufacturer, and they can maintain the truck easier because they can troubleshoot it quicker. And I think that's probably there's more and more. There's GPS built in the trucks where I can locate the truck. The newest thing that we're seeing is whether it's either your Apple iPhone or through your vehicle, you're notified immediately that there's an emergency vehicle in the area, and it's through Waze or through your Apple phone map. And so I think that's going to benefit all of us if the public knows we're coming, because they can't hear us coming. The sirens, I don't care what, even if it's an old queue, they're shut up and they've got ACDC playing very loud, and they can't hear anything.
Yeah, the trend of the American driver and their attention span is pretty staggering. Your average driver's listening to music, texting, talking to the phone, eating a hamburger, and if they have kids, they're slapping the hell out of their kids or petting their dog, and
Possibly learning a new song on the guitar.
right, yeah, playing the accordion, and it's pretty staggering. Our town's got some pretty heavy traffic loads, and it's a feat getting across town during our busy hours. And I've seen that I have not seen a driver literally not at this point. There's nothing that would surprise me as far as what someone's doing in a driving seat besides driving their vehicle.
And it's amazing too that I travel a lot, go to different towns, see a fire truck or an ambulance running code. I don't care if you're in Timbuktu or where people still do. They do weird things. They'll stop in the middle of the road. It's unpredictable. They don't know what they're going to do. They don't know what they're going to do. They're kind of shocked that we're there, and we're just asking for the right of way. We ask, can I please go on the left side of you and pass you and go help this lady having a heart attack? And they were like, nope, not today. Like, okay.
It's all right. We'll find out about it on Facebook, though.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And some of those weird things, and that we were talking about the Swiss Army. I remember seeing an engine that had a medical cot in the back end of it.
Yes, yeah, there's several of those been built.
Yeah, that's kind of that Swiss Army knife kind of
Transport ambulance fire truck. Yes.
Yeah, kind of getting way outside the box. Do you know much about them, or?
I've actually seen. I think it's in what state? Not Idaho, but somewhere in that northwestern area. There's departments that have them, and they've had multiple generations of them. They'll get a new one, and they'll replace it and get another one. And
Are they a city rural, like extreme rural, long distance travel type scenario, or is that just what they decided to do?
that's what they decided a long time ago, and it's worked for them, and they've continued that scenario for over decades.
Yeah.
But then you see some people try it, and they're like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Let's buy one of those." And they're like, "Ugh, the fire truck won't fit under the porta cochet at the hospital. Oops, didn't think about that."
Yeah. Yeah, I think where I saw them was maybe, I don't know, somewhere in the Austin area, Austin, Texas area,
Really?
around Austin, maybe Hutto
Yeah.
or one of those towns that's outside of Austin is where I saw them. And it's just, kind of shocked by it a little bit, and then like, maybe a great idea, maybe a terrible idea. I really don't know.
I know there was an engine like that somewhere in the Dallas area, and I don't know the story well enough to really talk about it, but there was an engine ordered like that.
I know of one, and
In the
the
Dallas
bad news
area.
was that the department bought it, put it in service, and then at some point the state of Texas, whoever handles EMS and ambulance certifications, came out and said, by law the head has to be at the front, and you've got the head at the side, and you can't use that. After they'd already spent the money.
After they'd already bought it, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
Nobody
Because
ever
that's
thought
a
of-
huge waste.
Nobody ever thought of the fact that the state would get involved in a fire truck. They regulate ambulances. They don't regulate fire trucks, but they do regulate how you carry a
A patient.
patient
Huh.
in Texas. Now, in other states, it may not be a problem. Arkansas, you can tug them sideways down the road. You can put them on the backboard, whatever, on the hose bed. They don't care. Just take them.
Just get them there, move them from A to B.
Yeah, Johnny and Roy, just get up in the hose bed.
When you are approached by an organization department to build a brush truck, because that's something in Texas that you can see a huge, you talk about a wide gamut of apparatus.
Oh, absolutely.
What is the vast majority of the trucks that you're seeing requested versus what's ultimately delivered?
We see a trend, I guess, more towards keeping the truck for longer than we anticipated. So make it heavier duty, give it more capability for lifts and off-road severe duty. We see a trend towards more multi-purpose brush truck, also carry a rescue tool, more of a initial attack, rescue. You see a lot of that. You don't see a lot of people, on the custom fire trucks. You see people trend towards more simpler. The brush truck, it seems like now we're going to try to add more duties for it. It needs to be able to do more.
And do you reckon that's an economic issue because that brush truck's a fraction of the cost of that custom pumper?
Probably true. Yes.
Are they built for 2 or 3 man crews or 4 man crews?
You see some people that try to go into the 4-door, but it adds a lot of wheelbase. The 2-door extended cab is probably the most popular because you do have room for gear and keep the gear clean inside and not have it hanging outside on the truck. We don't see that many 2-door cabs anymore just because you've got to carry all your gear, and you may carry an AED, a little bit of medical equipment in it. You can be cramped in a 2-door cab.
Oh yeah, I've spent weeks in them. Lived in a 2-door brush truck for ever. It was horrible.
Yeah, we used to have. Well, I guess actually we still do.
got
We
one.
have one truck that's a 2-door. There's a lot of benefits to it on scene because the dang thing will actually turn.
Oh yeah, it's very maneuverable.
One trend that I don't like in our brush trucks is that we've all gone with these F550s, and the trucks are catastrophically heavy. They turn like a battleship. It's a problem, significant problem, and kind of go down the rabbit hole for that on a second. Particularly on the Fords, they have that 19.5-inch rim. You can't get an aggressive tire for it.
No, you can't get a wide tire. It's hard to spread out the weight.
So you're running around in a wildland scenario with pizza cutters. That doesn't work. I couldn't tell you how many times I've been stuck in someone's front yard with our brush trucks, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, those 19.5-inch tires are kind of a pain in the rear. And it's not just Ford, Dodge, Chevrolet. They all do the same thing. You get into the 6500s and, the big trucks like that. They're all that 19.5. So you either super single it and go to a big old giant tire and a lift and all that stuff, or you just have the skis, I guess.
Well, we still see some people especially in a sandy loam area, they'll go back to the F350 because you can buy the larger wheels and tires. It's easy to get them. And go to a wide one, and that way it gives you more of a flotation. You're right on top of the sand as opposed to cutting it, a trench.
No. Yeah, the brush trucks, though, they are, particularly the tires, you've got two factors. You've got the weight of the apparatus and then ultimately the terrain. And the weight, to me, is something that is a problem, and it's where a lot of people want to throw the most amount of water on the truck, which needs a heavier bed, which is then going to require a heavier truck. And the tires that you end up putting on there become very critical in that aspect. And it's very difficult if you're going with, particularly, the new hot model of or in this case, trucks that are coming out, trying to be able to get tires that are accommodating to the terrain that you have.
Right, and then one of the advantages, though, to the larger lifted trucks with the larger tires, it's a military-grade tire, and it's purposely built to handle the terrain. And the one thing we've seen from them is they don't have tire failures. They just don't, whether they have 20-ply or 24-ply, the deeper lugs, they're purpose-built for that terrain, whether it's at Moab or off, severe duty in Arizona, California. They just don't seem to fail. I mean, you can throw a lot at them, whether it's cuts or rebar or whatever. They seem to hold up better. But again, they're purpose-built to be it's a military-grade tire, heavy duty. So there seems to be advantage to that. People that are in that kind of terrain, they want to buy a truck that's purpose-built to handle it and not fail, because that's the worst place you could fail. You're 200 miles off from anybody, from a gas station or service, and suddenly got a tire failure. That's not a good thing if you're on a deployment.
Yeah, it makes it exceedingly difficult if your apparatus is continually failing you nonstop. That's definitely not a good course of action there.
Yeah, we saw that where people got away from the dual rears just because they'd get rocks and cactus between the duals, and now you got both tires failing. So they go to a super single. But again, you have to make sure you're not just buying it out of a catalog and think, oh, this looks like a good one. You have to have it engineered. You want to handle the weight capacity of that 400 gallons of water and bed.
Well, yeah, for sure, because that's there's a lot of different budgets in the volunteer fire world throughout the country. I mean, there's guys that are cobbling together what they can cobble together with $25 and half a brain, and there's guys that have basically unlimited funds. There's not a lot of those unlimited fund guys out there, I would not imagine, but there's some. And when you're looking at that kind of stuff and you're trying to cobble it together yourself, and you look at this purpose-built, engineered apparatus, and you think, I can do that, you probably don't have the same vendors that they have. Your local Goodyear probably doesn't have the tire that manufacturer has. So you need to really think about that stuff a little deeper than, I can make it look like that. Well, you might make it look like that, but can you make it work like that?
I mean, that's why the apparatus is so expensive. Those really high-end brush trucks out there now are, standard 125, and I think I heard of one that was like 375 recently, and it was like, holy God, that's a brush truck. It's awesome, looks fantastic, but good Lord, what on earth are you doing spending that kind of money? Ross, to kind of segue the conversation on a new, just standard engine, is there, what equipment do you really consider as a no-brainer needs to be on there, no questions asked?
I think we need to go back to a simpler foam system, but have Class A foam, whether it's initial tack or overhaul. I think that's an important feature.
What about the trends for, like, I see them, departments moving the air packs out of the cab and going to a clean cab. Do you think that's better? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we see more and more of that. And what I try to point out to them, it's great that it is for the clean cab, but there's cities like in California, like Los Angeles, for example, they went to that 25 years ago and it had nothing to do with the clean cab. It had to do with guys stepping out with all that weight on and twisting their ankles and banging their knees up. So I think it's a valid reason to put them in the cab. I mean, at some point, yet it's a training thing too. You've got to be able to step out ready to fight fire. Well, if you're out there dancing around in somebody's yard, that makes us look kind of funny. And are you really ready to do work? So there's two sides to it. You have to, if you're going to put them out there, you need to be able to transition from street clothes to your battle dress fairly quickly and do it professionally. Because if you remember back in the days when we used to carry air packs in a box in the back on the rear step, there was two of them. Sometimes, especially at pitch black dark, you're back there fumbling around.
Yeah,
it's
in its plastic or metal case. I do remember some of that. I've seen that. It's a little bit weird, and that's the other thing. The guys that aren't in their bunker gear and they're getting dressed at the scene, because that's a common thing now. And we do it. We do it as volunteers all the time, because you may show up POV and somebody brought your gear to you or whatever, but that's not everybody, and there's generally somebody ready to go and get that initial attack started. So I'm kind of like you. I don't know how that plays into it. I don't know how you make that argument one way or the other.
As a manufacturer's rep, we're willing to accommodate. If somebody has an idea, we're willing to accommodate it. Let's think it through and think what's the best. We'll give you a lot of options. If you want to store them on a tray and slip them out, again, we're trying not to eat up a lot of space in the body because it's a precious commodity. You're paying for every inch of that square foot. So let's put them where it's easy to access them. They're not taking up too much room.
The gear debate is one that's kind of a interesting one to me. The problem for me is that we're in Texas, and even with an air conditioner on the cab, when it's 120 outside, it's hot in the truck. You have compounded travel times. So guys have their gear on, they're fully suited up, all their stuff's on, and they're just sitting there.
It's stressful, definitely.
Baking. And then they get on scene, and of course adrenaline and on kicks in. And they go in, and you get a 20-year-old guy, very physically fit, and he got 8 minutes out of a bottle. Well, I assure you, he's not using the wrong breathing tactics or anything like that. It's the fact that he got himself so hot to begin with, sitting in the truck before they ever made scene, because they're completely bundled up so that they can Kung Fu Panda roll off the truck and dive into the building. That's a problem here. And I see it routinely, particularly June, July, August, September, even into October. And I'm not advocating one way or the other, so I don't want someone to tactically nuke me on that. I'm just simply pointing out the fact that it's not Idaho. It does get exceedingly hot here. And when people bunk up in the trucks and they're going down the road and they're ready to get there, and then traffic delayed you for 20 minutes, and the whole time you're sitting there with your gear wrapped up, well, they're fully sweating by the time they move to take their seatbelt off. And again, I don't know what the solution is to that.
We've addressed that with there's some air conditioning options out there where we can cool the truck down in the bay where it's hopefully about 70 degrees as opposed to 90 or 100 degrees in the cab.
Right.
But again, that adds maintenance, that adds cost. Not everybody's willing to take a bite out of that.
Yeah. And in my experience in the volunteer world, when the air conditioner on the truck breaks, that just means it doesn't have an air conditioner anymore, because that's a luxury item that half the time the budget doesn't allow for.
Yeah, well, and I would think that's universal, at least in Texas. Just because the air conditioner's broken doesn't mean the apparatus isn't going to be remaining in service. Even in our big cities, I don't know if that's a required piece of equipment for operation for remaining in service.
No, you could see someone easily keep it in service for 4 or 5 months because of budget or because of I don't have a reserve, that type of thing. Like, yeah, we'll get it fixed, but we're waiting on our new one to come in or waiting on.
Good luck. Sweat a lot.
Yeah, and then I mean the other argument about keeping the gear and the air packs out of the trucks. Now you are back to, well, you've got X amount of seconds that you're dedicating to them putting their equipment on, getting their mittens on, and then finally taking preventative actions on scene. It's at least in our area, that is a factor, and anyone who doesn't say that's not a factor, I'll disagree with them.
Yeah, this public perception, they expect you to show up on scene ready to go. When he steps off the truck, he needs to be ready to go to work. And time is precious when you're stepping off the truck. So if you're stepping off and I've got to finish putting my coat on, now I've got to grab an air pack and put it on. It's something to, again, some people have embraced it and that's the direction they're going. But others are like, no, I need to be able to fight fire when I step off the vehicle.
About the furthest that I go with that is what I like to see my crews do is be bunked up, be packed out, but don't have their mask, hood, helmet on.
So it's not okay to drive with the mask on?
No.
Oh.
No. But you can definitely have a sombrero. That's okay.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's I've got that. I'm safe. I've got a mustache, so I don't technically need the mask. I think that with great mustache comes great responsibility.
Yes. The crews arriving on scene for me, it's so important to take 2 seconds to just stand there and actually look at what you're about to do. Get some uninterrupted visual data about what you're confronting. Get a clear, clean look at what you're doing. Then step into gear and go forth and do
One thing I used to teach when I was a training officer, when we taught guys how to put an air pack on, put their gear on and everything, and we don't have a mirror when we're standing out on the scene, but you have your buddy. And we challenge the guys to look at your buddy, and if his hood's not on correct, help him out. I mean, y'all are each other's mirror. Let's make sure he's set, ready to go to work, and he should do the same for you. Hey, pull your collar up. Velcro your collar up. Whatever.
Yeah. We have pretty good practices on that.
Yeah, so help each other out at that point, because we don't have a mirror to stand there and look at it and like, oh, look, this is out of place.
Because there's nothing like, you may not die from a hot water burn running down your neck of your jacket or your sleeve, but boy, it'll get your attention.
Oh, yeah, I've had scorched ears a couple of times because there was that little gap there.
Some of those guys believed you didn't need the hood because you had to feel it. So, those old guys, but
Just go in there till your ears get hot.
yeah.
Or melt.
Ross, have you seen more and more of an integration of ergonomics and logistics into the modern fire engine versus, the older apparatus?
Well, definitely ergonomics. Most manufacturers have an ear towards that. They want to make the seats comfortable, not just a wood shelf to sit on, chunk of wood. And so they're trying to make it more comfortable because, again, you're going to spend time in the truck. Some guys have to ride in that thing all day long as they chase ambulances, make medical calls, make long distance runs out in the county. So I think it's safer, especially for the drivers, having things ergonomically where they can reach things. We're seeing redundancy in switches, like the emergency warning switches. You'll have one down low and one overhead as well. So we're seeing a lot of that type of thing.
Okay.
So why would we do that?
Just safer. Safer if if he's comfortable, he's not having to shift back and forth, he can reach what he needs to reach.
It's kind of like the air horn button on the pump panel.
Yeah, those are handy.
Yeah, I like that one. I use that every time.
We see the same thing in a bucket. We'll see an air horn in the bucket. I used it earlier last week.
Yeah.
Like, you want to get someone's attention, like the air horns blast, and everybody was looking, hey, where'd that come from?
Yeah. How did you do that? It's voodoo magic.
Yeah, I've got this red button in the basket of the platform. Air horn.
I might have to go look and see that because I didn't know that was there. That's awesome.
Yeah, and just like we have them at the pump panel, that's to notify the guy charging the hydrant, hey, look at me, I'm ready, let's do it. Send me some water.
I'm just guessing that probably one of your biggest challenges when somebody comes to you and says, I need a new truck. How do you prepare them for the escalating cost of that stuff? How do you get them to a reality of this isn't what it was 25 years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what we tell them first is let's do your due diligence. Just make sure this truck is right because you're not going to get a do-over. You can't come up 2 years later and say, wow, this truck's to this or to that. Maybe we should have bought something smaller or bigger. So let's do our homework at first. Look at, and ask yourself a question. Do I really need stainless steel body, or is that something that's a legitimate need, or is that, hey, that would really be cool to have a stainless steel body.
God, people do that?
Up north, I would think that would be a pretty commonplace thing with the salt and all that.
I just heard this week, and this kind of ties into that, I heard this week that 70% of the nickel used to build stainless steel is in one little country called Ukraine. Yeah.
So all the nickel comes from Ukraine?
70% of the nickel made to make stainless steel comes from Ukraine. Anybody know of any shipments coming out of Ukraine right now other than refugees? Or
I don't know how strong the pack mule line is coming out of that country right now.
So imagine what guys that produce stainless right now are going,
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I had no clue about that. That thing's a mess. That's about all we can say about that.
True.
Ross, is there any new technology on the horizon that you see that might be kind of coming in and becoming a new industry standard that you can talk about that's not proprietary information?
Well, surprisingly enough, this is one of those years where we're not seeing a lot of new. We're just trying to perfect what we have. And this is for all manufacturers. We've came a long ways in the last several years, making safer trucks with airbags and safety built into the truck. It makes it more automotive. Maintenance features like I mentioned before, the Wi-Fi, the ability to connect to the truck and know what the truck's doing or why it's doing it, troubleshoot faster. So we're seeing more and more of that connectivity to the truck. I think, again, one of the trends that we're seeing is keeping it simple. Try to make the truck as simple as possible so anybody can operate it. And then with larger fleets, I say larger, a department's got 2 stations. Let's make those trucks fairly similar to each other so we can store the traffic cones in the same place. Or the pony sections of hose, let's put that in the same spot on each truck and maybe a tanker. So you see that trend. You just want to make people aware of it. I've been real blessed and fortunate. I counted up couple of years ago, over 600 fire trucks over 30 years. That's a lot of trucks out there. And the trend's always progressive toward let's make our next one better. You know, we like the last 10 we built. Those were great, Russ, but let's make this one even better. I need to do more capabilities. Got to carry rescue tools. I may not have more space to deal with, but let's try to store things differently and better and make it more efficient.
Awesome.
And if you're a growing department or growing city or something like that, I could see where, because the life of that truck being 20 years, you're probably going to need something before that. I mean, there's probably a handful of those trucks that don't get a 20-year service life because they've outgrown the truck or need something bigger or better. What happens with those trucks?
They find a home, but one of the things we've noticed, especially more back in the 90s, that if you look at a 7 to 10 year period, anywhere from through the 80s or through the 90s, technology changed, brakes changed on trucks, transmissions were better. So sometimes you may not want to hold a 15-year-old truck because, you know, now the trucks we're finding are simpler, they're easier to maintain, they're safer. So sometimes embracing that new technology, having a foam system that works, you know, some of those 20 years ago, the foam systems were enormous. They were maybe overbuilt for that truck, and they were so complicated, suddenly they didn't work. You know, same thing with calves. Everybody thought calves was the greatest thing since sliced bread, but unless you maintained it and used it, it was just another tool that, well, we spent $100,000 on that, but it didn't work when I needed it, or it's too expensive to maintain. So
I think the pressure governor is a good example of that versus the old relief valve. You know,
right.
You had that relief valve that was usually stopped up, and 3 people
True.
knew how to set it.
Right.
And the pressure governors kind of changed the way that.
Yeah, it makes things easy.
Yeah, the implementation of technology, it was really kind of surprising to me when I came into the fire service. Now, granted, when I started volunteering, I came from equipment that was exceedingly advanced and complex and heavy life safety emphasis built into redundancy. And when I first encountered our very first apparatus, and these were the first true fire trucks I'd ever really been around, spent time with, and there was no difference between something that at the time was built between 1989 and something built in 2004. It was the exact same technology. It was the exact same design. And to me, that was staggering to see that the fire service itself was lagging so far behind in things like ergonomics and just the general planning of the apparatus. There was no advancement in the technology. I mean, we got past the horse and stopped.
Well, to take the same thing with TICs, with thermal imagers, you know, we always, back in the 90s, we thought it was fantastic. You know, spend $25,000, you get this tool that we can see through smoke. And you talk to guys that were in the military, and they're like, yeah, we had that 20 years ago. Really? Why didn't we have it 20 years ago? Nobody ever thought about a fireman needing to see through smoke. But
yeah, it's to me, that was staggering. Now, that is not the case today. You go to a trade show, you go to a manufacturer, you sit down on a building committee, and yes, now you get to have pearl inlay and the kitchen sink involved in the discussion. But there is still a significant, I would argue, a significant technology gap that still hasn't come into the firefighting side. To me, it's insane that they haven't figured out how to integrate the thermal imager into the mask, the SCBA mask. That is insane to me. That technology has literally been out since the U.S. Air Force started doing fly-by-wire in the 60s. Don't get me wrong, I know that's expensive, but the fact of the matter is that the firefighting industry as a whole, the benefits of being able to integrate some of this technology and make it where it's an automatic visual heads-up display would revolutionize the entire industry, top to bottom. The change and the impact on life safety and the ability to make entry have automatic heads-up display of, the thermal image mapping of the room, hot spots that you can directly see. It would literally revolutionize the entire firefighting industry, and I would argue go as far as in the short and long run, fundamentally alter basic fireground tactics almost immediately because of the power that individual would have. And that same technology can be implemented into the apparatus. I mean, and I'm not saying that you would have self-driving fire trucks, but that kind of information given to the engineer while operating the apparatus is something that's a huge palpable difference that's just truly not being integrated yet. And again, I know it's cost.
So having had the opportunity to go to FDIC several times over the last 30 years, you see a lot of that new technology, and this is what's capable. Even with air packs, you saw air packs that have like little tiny bottles and they weigh 5 pounds. You're like, that's awesome. This is developed with NASA, and you never see it come to market. I don't know if it's the cost too much or.
Sure. It's cost. You see it in aviation, and particularly in the military. You have the ability to come up with something just short of an Iron Man suit, but the problem is that it costs $3.5 million per suit of armor, and the costs break down. It's just unjustifiable. And that's not trying to be crude, not trying to be evil there, but that is how government spending happens. It's cost versus reward, and you can't take just whatever department's budget. We'll just say that the fire department's budget's $1 million a year and increase it to $420 million a year. That's not feasible. It's not in the realm of economics.
But back to that thermal imager, I mean, today I can go on Amazon or somewhere and I can buy a thermal imager that snaps into my phone, that's the width of my phone and an inch thickness of my phone. Well, that's that whole entire thermal imager's technology besides the display in a package that's the size of your cell phone. So
and
how
less than $250?
Yeah, how does that not get integrated into something? Like the technology's there, the ability to make it smaller. Like the early 2000s Bullard thermal imager was like an anchor, and it weighed like 50 pounds, and you had to drag it around, and 3 guys had to lift it up so you could look into the monitor on it. But that's not it. The technology's already there. The products are available. Why is it not integrated into that?
I'll take a whack at this. It's all agencies are governed by some bureaucratic nightmare. And there's going to be a safety board, a recommendation board, some sort of panel that you're ultimately going to have to clear. And I'll completely avoid the fire service here and just talk about something I'm very familiar with the FAA and the NTSB. And getting new technology to be integrated into aircraft is a literal act of Congress. Not a figurative, literal act of Congress, because it's got to clear the NTSB. And the fire service suffers from the same thing. And you have really small companies with really good ideas, but they can't clear the panels because there's no way that they'll ever be able to afford the 4,000 years of research and development that's now being imposed on them. And this is one thing where being volunteer is awesome, because we don't necessarily have to take and follow a direct government recommendation and make it applicable to how we perform our jobs, particularly here in Texas. And you can utilize and implement new tools and development at our training field. I'm not saying use this stuff and test it out on scene. I'm saying you build your programs through your volunteer fire departments. Bring your technology to your volunteer fire departments. Let them test it. Let them try and break it, and we'll be good at that. Give a firefighter a glass hammer and an anvil, they'll lose a hammer and break the anvil. So that is something, if we ever had the opportunity to have, and we do, occasionally we have people that come in with the new concepts, and we'll set something up at our training field, and we'll run it through. And it is fantastic when we have that opportunity to work with a handful of companies that have come in and done that. And that'd be the one thing that I'd say for anyone out there, that, boy, if you have an idea, don't be afraid to try and build and develop it, and then go through your department. And don't get me wrong, being an entrepreneur is an absolute nightmare. That's hard. God forbid, especially if you need to try and get a patent on something. That's not easy. But at the end of the day, particularly the fire service is going to be exceedingly practical. If it makes a difference, truly makes a difference, it somehow or another ultimately gets through.
Right. True.
I mean, ultimately, the Halligan had to be invented somewhere.
Right. And that was a guy that was finally done with his Acme axe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tired of breaking it. Yeah.
So I'd like to talk about the antique fire truck world, because I know you know a lot about that, and you've been around that a lot. And so if you're a guy that just wants to own an antique fire apparatus, how do you find other people? How do you find an apparatus? How do you get involved in that?
Well, there's clubs. That's where I would start. That's where I started at, with a regional type club, and you get to know other guys that are, and a lot of those guys, it kind of shocked me, they're not necessarily firemen. They're just buffs. They just think fire trucks are cool, and they're part of a group that may own one or two, or they may be part of a museum that owns several apparatus. But that's where I suggest start with a group. That's how I bought my first one. I was at one of our club meetings. I've been a member for about a year, and one of the guys had just finished refurbing a 51 LaFrance open cab pumper, and he had brought it to the meeting, and I asked the big question, what would something like that cost if I wanted to buy one? And he gave a price, and before asking my wife, I wrote the check for it, and then look what we bought.
And she was proud. It was a
proud
proud
yeah, exactly.
How long did you have the apparatus for?
We used that one for probably, it's like anything else, like a boat. You just don't own one. So I've sold that one and then upgraded to a similar, I owned 4 or 5 700 series LaFrances, and you try to upgrade each time. Get one that's a little better, a little more history to it, a little cleaner. But yeah, they were a lot of fun. And our family embraced it. My girls loved to ride on parades and do fire prevention programs, you name it. They enjoyed it. Our members embraced it. We actually were fortunate. We kept my last one. I kept it at the fire station for a number of years. We had an extra bay, and groups would always, we had these shiny new fire trucks sitting there, but they always gravitated towards those antiques. Yeah, look at this one, look at that. That's real gold leaf. That's,
For sure.
And everything worked on it. But they're enjoyable. They're a good family. If a guy had girls or guys, either one, small children, they're fun to get involved with it. Riding on a parade, getting your friends together, go cruise the neighborhood.
I've seen a collector that had some, and he painted a same-day fire company on all of them. They were old chain drive, like REOs and stuff like that. And it's just so cool to, be in the parade and it says same-day fire company on it. That's a pretty good little giggle out of that. But, if I was searching the internet and I came across some, Craigslist ad for a, 51 Mac or whatever in the heck it is, how do I know, how can I evaluate that thing to know what I'm going to be in for?
Well, at the end of the day, they're mechanical. It's like buying a 51 Chevrolet or a Ford. It's mechanical, and have a mechanic, somebody you trust. Hey, take a look at this and see, is it something I can sustain? Is it something I can afford to keep up? I mean, there's a lot of learning curve there when I first, and I'm not mechanical. I know about fire trucks, but as far as rebuilding the motor, that was something that always amazed me with those 50 model era LaFrances is the owner's manual was about a 1/4 inch thick. And from page 3 on, it was how to rebuild the motor and how to set the valve lash and how to change your brakes. And nowadays, we deliver a new apparatus. We tell them how to operate it, but we don't tell them how to maintain it or how to go into the detail of let's rebuild your motor,
Yeah.
Or
Well,
put new pistons in. And
that's your average homeowner at home had his car up on blocks in the driveway putting new brakes on it in the 50s.
yeah, exactly.
And that's just not a thing anymore. And I think technology's pushed it past the point where people can do a bunch of that stuff on their own. But
I think the fun thing too with antiques is like in some areas they have museums, and the museum that I've been involved with in particular, we have from tractor-drawn, horse-drawn apparatus all the way up to trucks in the 70s, which I look at and go, that's not an antique. Well, yeah, it is now, because if you look at the 25-year rule, then yeah. So that's always fun just to see all that from the 30s and the 40s and 50s. And
yeah, even that old Ford C cab is now an antique.
unfortunately, yeah.
Is there a particular apparatus you'd recommend avoiding?
I probably aerials, because most of the aerials that were sold from, say, the 80s back were non-rated aerials. So you put that ladder in the air and put a couple of people on there, there's a potential to get hurt, to hurt someone, death. So yeah, aerials, plus the size of them, they're not feasible for antiques.
You mean you don't want to put someone out on a 1930s 85-foot wooden ladder?
No. I've seen one of our meetings, we had I can't mention names and towns, but we met at a local fire department, and they brought out several of their 50 models, and they had an old tractor drawn from the 50s that they actually got from the tractor part, or the trailer with the ladder was from another truck. It had been originally a Christie tractor drawing it, and then they upgraded the chassis, and now this city owned it. And it was a wooden ladder, and it's one of those you crank the thing up, and then you push this big lever on the floor, and boom, the ladder goes up to 45. And some of us had never seen that. We were just shocked, like, wow, do that again, But then knowing aerials like I do, you're like, you're looking for the data plate. What is this truck rated at? Oh, they weren't rated. You just climb it and hope your insurance is paid up, and maybe.
Yeah, wear your parachute.
Yeah.
What's the strangest restoration you've seen, or most unique at least?
They do a lot of restorations at the museum, and some of the size of some of the old pump. So it's basically a wagon, like a horse-drawn wagon, that carries water, and you have the piston pumps on there where you pump either side. You're on one side, I'm on the other, and we're pumping this. Some of the detail on some of those restorations are phenomenal. To see them actually make it work again. And that's something you don't go to the parts store and buy parts for. Every part you replace is you have to machine it. So that's pretty interesting seeing them.
Yeah, you're not going down to Napa and getting the 1903 hand pump, whatever. Yeah, that'd be tough.
Yeah, our organization's lucky. We've got a early 1950s model, and then we've also got a 1937 Ford, and it's a classic pickup truck. And it was a pickup truck, fire truck. And we're, believe it or not, actually stoking the boiler and bringing in coal right now to theoretically take a pretty solid whack at the restoration of this critter. and it'll be a while. The guy that's helping kind of lead the charge on this, he's got a restoration background, but he's never done something quite like this. And the big thing that I was telling him is, do not expect this to be less than a year. It won't be.
True.
That
And I think COVID kind of set that back, because I know
Yeah.
we had a pretty good head of steam going in 2019, and then 2020 hit, and everything's off the radar.
Right.
That was
And
my perception.
we, I would just be thrilled to have this truck up and running again. And it's going to be a massive, massive project. There'll be some upgrades to it to modernize it, get rid of the cable brakes. I took the time and went and found some of our older members that had stories with that truck. And every single one of them, and they all wrecked it. And they all had accidents because of the cable brakes. Drove into a bank once. The floor caught on fire going down the road because the exhaust was too close to the wooden floorboard. There was another one where they somehow or another completely managed to coast through town with not hitting anyone because they could never stop. The only way they could stop was coming to a downshifting and coasting. So it appears that the cable brakes are an automatic no-go. So we're going to get those replaced out. I think we've already got the brake cylinders and the drums for that set up too. We pulled that off of a 1941 dump truck is where those came from. So God knows what crate and rattlesnakes filled that's at, but we do have the truck. And the truck's actually mostly complete. So, and the handful of things that we are missing are things that would be easily replaced, not trying to find fenders and grills and cowlings and dashes and seats and hose reels and on and on.
I'm excited for that project. I'm looking forward to it, just because I like to tinker. Any other words of wisdom for the listeners on just apparatus stuff in general, or?
No, I would say just take your time and pick a good target of what you need in the apparatus and be a realistic budget. I think for the small departments too, they forget the fact that you can do a lease purchase and you can spread it out over 8-10 years, and that's your friend. Try to use that. Even if you need to trade the truck in before then, if you say, you come up at 5 or 6 years and you're like, okay, we've outgrown this truck, we need to buy a Quint. You can work with the leasing company and roll that into the next one. There's a lot of versatility there in leasing. They'll work with you. I've done a couple of them in the past where a town knew. I know towns that were started off for 1,200, 1,400 people, and they needed a new fire truck, but we knew they were about to explode. And now that town is actually 30,000, 40,000 people. But that first truck, we spread it out where they paid a little bit of money the first 2 years and then gradually increased it to where they could get a new truck, made it affordable for them. So they'll work with you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if your town's out there telling you, oh, it can't afford it, blah blah blah, you guys just got to keep driving that 1972 fire truck. You got to really get them to open up and really look at some options like that, because the reality is you're not doing your community a service.
No, absolutely not.
Having something that
Yeah,
old.
you got to be able to make the justification. Quite frankly, the justification's simple.
The safety and reliability is
Right.
the two key factors there.
The funding, I get it. It's difficult, but you've got to be able to do the most basic justification, and that literally just short of writing itself writes itself. And I do realize that towns and counties in some states are in fiscal distress. I understand that, but that you can also get creative in approaching multiple entities for funding. Are you a small town that also responds out into the county? Well, that sounds like something that the town and county can work on together. Are you a small town that doesn't even have a tax base? Okay, that sounds like a county and state problem. There's a lot of grants and a lot of organizations out there that specifically focus on those exceedingly small and exceedingly unwell-funded departments out there. And it really does just come down to being able to do the hustling footwork. You can't do a bake sale to try and cover the purchase of the apparatus, but you can try and figure out how to come up with a significant donation or contribution towards the down payment of the truck. I have a family member that's on an absolutely tiny volunteer fire department in Texas, and what they do is they approach their local ranches, big ranches, and they have the ranches sponsor trucks. And now the apparatus they go after is brush trucks, but that's
That's
lucky
where their need is.
yeah, and lucky enough for them, the ranches have taken it as a friendly competition. So what ends up happening is that now they're freaking armed to the hilt with these absurd brush trucks because the ranches keep trying to outcompete each other, which works fantastic for everyone. That's just one possible option there. But the grants and the federal funding and state funding that's out there, if you're a new chief, you're taking over a new department, maybe you haven't been doing this that long, you don't have that long of a fire background, don't hesitate to reach out to the state and your state agencies and kind of see what programs are out there. Find a department around you that you think's got some stuff that you like and go figure out how they got it. Did they buy it all? Did they go through in our case, the Texas Forest Service grant system? There's a lot of options, and it's kind of staggering to me at how many of the really small, really rural departments don't even realize those programs are out there, and those programs are truly out there for them.
True. Yeah, that's a good resource. And you can get creative with those as well. We've done several over the years where someone's taken that grant and built something outside the box that met their needs, and the Forest Service, just as long as you give a good justification, then they're good with it.
And it still checks their boxes on
Sure.
their specs.
Exactly.
Maybe an engine with a dump valve on the back of it, because I think I've done that twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've seen quite a few of those.
Yeah, and it checks the box for that tanker for them, but it checks the box for an engine for us. So.
True.
And you're able to now get solid apparatus. I mean, you weren't having to get a Chinese shipped apparatus. These are American manufacturers,
Right.
And your reps for these organizations and these companies that deal in fire apparatus, don't be afraid to reach out to them. Those are exceedingly knowledgeable individuals, and they are familiar with the programs. Now, they're not going to necessarily do all the paperwork for you, and they're not going to do the justification for you, but they're going to definitely point you in the right direction.
One important thing, too, with the Forest Service is just because back in 1992, you received a Forest Service grant doesn't preclude you from getting another one, because everybody in the state's gotten at least one truck, sometimes two, and they have the funding to be able to replace that truck for you.
Yeah, they're on into the second and third rounds on a lot of departments.
Yeah. Because they understand those things. Yeah, if we funded a truck in 94 or 98, yeah, it's worn out. Let's do it again.
For sure. Well, you got anything else, Matt?
I've got a ton, but I think we ought to probably start wrapping this up.
Yeah, for sure.
Sounds good. Enjoyed being here. Appreciate y'all.
You bet.
Well,
We'll
thank
do
you,
it
Ross.
again. We'll do it again. So goodbye and good night, and thanks for tuning in to It Tastes Like Burning.
Last piece of advice. First rule of government spending: why buy one when you can buy two at twice the price?